Paz Hashem Yisbarach, we begin Perek Abba, the 24th Perek in the Rambam Hilchos Ishut, the laws of marriage and Sefer Nashim, which the Rambam continues in the theme of the previous Perakim regarding the laws of the monetary rights that each spouse has, and as it relates to the Ksuba. And in this Perek, the Rambam discussed regarding women that they lose their rights of their Ksuba. Some of these Rambam is going to discuss in this 24th Perek, discusses the islandess, me'enes, other women that are forbidden on the husband regarding as it comes up to the Ksuba. If someone is removed from the marriage because of Shemra, because she has a bad name, or Hoiveres al Das, if she violates one of the types of Jewish law, if we force him to remove her, regarding a woman that tells her husband that she was Zinsa Tachta Berat and she willingly was Mezana, regarding as it relates to the wife of a non-Kain who was Mezana when she was married, whether if it was B'Shegir or Ba'inus, if it wasn't intentional and willingly, and regarding that of the wife of a Kain, that's different, even if she had bia b'shega ba'inus. And finally, regarding the wife of a kohen, if she tells her husband that I was raped, then nasti, which then she's forbidden on her husband, if what the actual halach is going to be in that situation. So begin halach aleph. The Rambam opens up regarding if a woman gets married without a ksuba. Hanoises islandess, if someone marries an islandess, which is an impotent woman, a woman who's sterile, who can't have children. We already described the specifics of the signs that are indicating islandess in the second parak. So he marries an islandess, and this man didn't have any other children. He wasn't married either to any other woman to have children from. So even though we force him and he has to go ahead and divorce this islandess so that he should be able to go ahead and marry someone else and they'll want to marry him and he doesn't have any other co-wife, as the Rambam said in the Perek Tezvav. So even though we force him to divorce her, she's like all women, and she has a ksuba because he recognized that she was an islandess from the beginning, so there's no mistaken acquisition, mekech toys over here. And also all the other stipulations of the ksuba, which is that she gets fed, and she gets healed, and she gets redeemed. So too, the husband merits, regarding when he merits in all other women, and inheriting and so on and so forth. That is, so the islandess is going to have the same halacha regarding all other women. Now, ba'alacha beis, but let's say someone marries a woman, and he did not recognize Bahar. Only Venimtz's islandess subsequently finds out that she's an islandess, or she's from one of the women that's biblically prohibited based on a negative prohibition, like a grusha to a kohen, which he didn't recognize this when they got married that she was a grusha. Or someone marries a woman that's rabbinically forbidden to marry. Bein hikraba, whether he recognized this, bein lo hikraba, whether he did not recognize this, in contrast to the previous cases only of lo hikraba, here by the shnia is whether he recognized it or not. Ein lo ksuba, in all these cases, she's not going to have the primary ksuba where the chacham penalized her, because in this situation, she's going to try to seduce him to marry her, because she doesn't lose anything when she's married to him, because she's already invalid anyway, and the child that she has from him is also going to be kosher. So therefore, even if he recognized this beforehand, she loses everything. In contrast, the first cases regarding Almana and Chibalavin, where they do become invalidated when they marry him, and their child becomes possible, so they're not going to want to try to get him to marry. So rather, it's him that's trying to seduce her to get married. So therefore, they don't lose their ksuba, only if he had not known this from the beginning, because then it's a problem like echtoy. So that's the difference between the shnia, a secondary erva, and that of someone who marries a woman that's an islandess or chibalavin. There has to be that he didn't recognize, in contrast to shnia, whether he did or he didn't. But in all these cases, she does not get the primary ksuba, and neither does she get the stipulations that come along with the ksuba, but she does get that of the additions, because that's a gift that he gives her because of the excitement that he's going to have relations with her. So it has nothing to do with regarding the marriage itself. And moreover, she doesn't even get fed, but even after he passes away. I mean, we don't have to say when they're married she doesn't get mezainis because they're living in sin. And if she's going to get fed, she's going to stay married to this husband. But even after he's dead, she doesn't get mezainis. Now, when they force him and they separate the couple, they do not extract from the husband the produce that he ate from his wife's nechasim. So even though he doesn't have to redeem her, and the whole paris for the husband was only because of redeeming her, even so, the paris that he ate, we don't make him pay back because as a penalty for her marrying him. Now, halacha gimel, v'loma ein lahem eker, says the Rambam. Why does she not get the primary ksuba? But she does get the addition, and that's all these cases we're discussing. Like we said, the women who don't get a ksuba. So Iker Shita Kan Chacham, because the primary, which is a rabbinic institution, Kadesh Leiti Kalabein Leitziah, so that it should not be light in his eyes to get rid of her, as we had explained in Perik Yud. So Hoivela Hikerba, so since he didn't recognize this about her, saying Laker, she doesn't get the primary ksuba because here there's no Tekan Chachamim, because the rabbis also want her to actually get divorced because they're not supposed to be married. But regarding the additions which he obligated himself in, so as long as she's willing and she stands in front of him and she most definitely is staying in the marriage, because if she would want to leave the marriage, then she wouldn't get the B'tei Sefer because he didn't give her this gift with her to take it and run. But if as long as she's willing to stay over here, so she's doing her part, and he went and he acquired to her benefit, and she's standing here in front of him. It's only the Torah that's making her forbidden on him. What could she do? So therefore she gets the addition that he promised her. It's not her own actions that make her forbidden to him after they're married. She was always forbidden. So therefore he has to divorce her. But that's the primary ksuba, but the Ketei that he added on, that he still has to pay her. Now, Halacha Daled says the Rambam, to clarify what he said in Halacha Beis, now why didn't they differentiate by the secondary erva? Whether if he knew this beforehand or he didn't know this before, that rather they said, in whatever the situation is, even if he knew this about her, she does not get the primary ksuba in contrast to the chiv alavin and the idleness. Says the Rambam, because that's rabbinically prohibited. So also b'chizik, so therefore they strengthen the retire doesn't need to be mechuzik. Everyone knows the biblical Torah law, but rabbinic law people might be lenient, so therefore they were actually more stringent and required her to lose her ksuba even if he knew about it beforehand. Now, but let's say if he married one of those that are biblically prohibited by a negative prohibition, and he knew this about her, or one of those that are prohibited because of a positive commandment. Now, bein hikrba, bein shelo hikrba, whether he knew this or he didn't know this, that's regarding the chiv aseh. So yesh ksuba, so she's get a ksuba. Why? Because regarding the negative prohibition that he recognized this about her, so he wanted to feed her from his estate because he knew this. And the chiv aseh is from kal, and that which is a positive commandment is a more of a lesser type of a prohibition. So therefore, she's going to get a ksuba even if he didn't know this about her. Because, and it also does not need chizik to penalize her because it's biblical. Now, and both of them get fed from the estate after that he passes away. But when he's alive, they don't, because we want him to remove her because they're living in sin. But after he's dead, then they do get fed from the estate. And so too, if she borrows and she eats because he went out of town, Chayav L'Shalom has to pay for that. Now, when we force them to divorce these prohibited women, in these cases we actually do remove from the husband whatever payers that he had inappropriately eaten from her estate, because he wasn't allowed to, because there was no halacha of marriage for them, meaning although kedushin is taifus, but he wasn't supposed to be married, therefore it's appropriate to penalize when he knew this, because in this situation he's trying to appease them to marry in sin. In contrast to the Shnia, as we explained, there she wants him to marry her, so we penalize her, he would penalize him, and whatever he had eaten, we extract from him to give back to them. Halacha Hey, Hamamo Enes. The woman who was a katana got married by her brother or her mother, and she's refusing that rabbinic marriage. In ksuba, such a woman does not get a ksuba because she's leaving on her own against the will of her husband, which she has the right. But the addition that he added on, that she does get. And because that was a gift that he gave her because of the excitement by getting married, nothing to do with the fact he knew that she's a minor and she could refuse, so therefore he obviously gave it with that intention. Now, we don't, however, extract from the husband whatever payers he ate. And let's say she borrowed when she was still married to him, and she consumed those foods that she borrowed because he was out of town, then she refused the marriage. So when the husband comes back, we cannot extract those foods that she borrowed with when he was away. We cannot collect it from the husband, because just like she doesn't get a ksuba, because she's a minor that's doing mean, so she does not get the tnai ksuba, which is mezainis. Halacha vav. If a woman is mezanam, she has an extra marital affair when she's married with her husband. So in ksuba, this woman does not get a ksuba. Lo ikra b'lei tesefes, not the primary, not the addition, because she didn't keep her part of the condition, which is to be faithful to him. So it's her undoing. So neither does she get either one of the stipulations of the ksuba, which is all the things, getting fed and etc. Because it was her actions that made her forbidden the husband, so now it's her fault, so therefore she does not get her ksuba. Now Allah Zayin, the Rambam continues regarding others that lose their nedunya. Halacha Zayin, v'heich din nashim elu. What's the halacha of these women that we're talking about here in this parak, each one individually? Ben nedunya shalad. What's with the halacha we're talking about the ksuba, which is what he's giving to her? What's with the nedunya which she brought into the marriage? So says the Rambam, Kol isha shenedunya sekayem, any woman that the dowry still extends, is still around. Afilas and say even if she was mezana, netal shalav she could take what's hers and she could leave. The Meisah Shni, if she was a secondary erva, which is a rabbinically forbidden, or one of the positive commandments, and here we're putting Chiva Say together with the Shniya, Ben Hikaba, whether he knew this about her, Ben Shalikaba, whether he did not know this about her, or if she was an islandess, or from those which are biblically prohibited with a negative prohibition, and he knew this about her, in contrast if he didn't, in all these cases, Harib and Yosef, she has halacha with her dowry like all regular women, which that the Rambam continues and he says, which is Nichsit and Baz. Regarding the iron sheep properties which he takes responsibility for, he's responsible for that insurance. The Nichsim Alay, which Allah is, whatever gets stolen or gets lost, Avad law is a loss for her, because he does not take insurance, and he does not have to compensate her. And the reason for all this is because since all these cases, as we mentioned previously in Halacha Dal, she gets a ksuba like all of the women, so therefore the halacha of her dowry is like all other women, which is going to be the same as we said for Nichsim and Baz and Nichsim Alay. Halacha Ches. Haisa islandess. Let's say she was an islandess. Or from the women that are biblically prohibited for a negative prohibition to get married to. He did not know this about her when they got married. Whatever gets lost or stolen, or gets worn out or gets rubbed out from these assets, which are the Tzem Barzel, which generally he's responsible for insurance. Here he didn't know this about the woman when he got married. In the Balchai of the husband is not obligated to pay. And the reason is as follows. She gave him permission that these assets should be by him. That's what next term Basel is. It's like totally in his domain, and he's responsible for what's going to happen. Now, she knew that she's forbidden to him, so therefore she was Michael, she was pardoning him from the beginning. Now, although he accepted responsibility, but when you say that the Kedushin is betois, when he ends up finding out, he didn't know this about her, she knew. When he ends up finding out about this, so then by default, whatever the responsibility was, is also void, null and void. So, therefore, he's not obligated in what happens to the Nechsit Tzar Basa. Now, but in contrast, whatever gets stolen or lost from her Nisim Eloig, actually Chayiv L'Sham, there he has to pay. It's the exact opposite of all other women. Generally, women, he is not responsible for Nisim Eloig, responsible for Nisim Basa. Here's the opposite. Why? Because here, as I find there's a Mekach Tois, he didn't know this about the wife. It ends up being a mistaken acquisition, a mistaken marriage. So it wasn't a bona fide marriage. So therefore, so really he had no rights in the Nichsim Elug. It's only by a real husband that has the rights in the pairs, and he's not responsible. Here it's like as if he received it, where he's getting benefit from it, where like a borrower who is responsible for whatever happens. So actually, but Nechsit Tzar Basel, she knew, so she was Michael. So it's opposite of a regular wife. Halacha says, V'amamo enes. Now, this woman who, as we mentioned before, that does mean that as a minor, so in Lebloi's clothes, she doesn't get her worn out items at all, meaning, we don't extract from the husband something that got stolen, that got lost from her properties that he was using, whether it's because that he got married to her with the sanction of the courts. Now, when he uses her properties, he could say that, yeah, when I divorce her on my own, then I'll give back what I took with insurance. Now, even though he's not allowed to use, he could say, yeah, but I have no responsibility to give it back until I divorce her. Maybe she's going to die. I'm not even going to have necessarily that responsibility because it's really hard. He only gets the payers. But maybe she's going to die in my lifetime and I'll inherit her. I won't have to pay her. But she's leaving on her own. Okay, that she's doing. So therefore, not necessarily would he be obligated, and therefore he's exempt. Rather, she only takes what's still around, and that's what she leaves it. But anything that was used up, lost, or stolen, that he's not going to be responsible for. Now, Halacha Yud, the Rambam continues with different actions that make the woman lose her rights. Where if she violates certain laws or she has a bad name about her, then she will lose the rights to her Gesub. Halacha Yud. If a woman was Mazanim, she had relations with another man when she was still married to her husband, Ein ksuba, she does not get a ksuba. Lo ikabel tezev is not the primary ksuba, which every woman gets, and not the additions that he added on, which the Rambam had already explained all this in Halacha Vav. He's only writing this because he wants to put it similar to the other categories that are similar regarding violating other things. And ve'imitzim abal davar, we don't remove from the husband anything that was lost or stolen from her nichsitz or basel, which usually he is responsible for the insurance. And then we don't have to say we don't extract from him, which is not his responsibility ever, of nichsim maluk. Now, and this is why the Rambam brought it in, because he wants to say, adding on to the category, not only if she was actually mizana, even if she just violates the faith of Moshe Rabbeinu, which means that if it's written in the Torah, or in the Jewish faith, which are certain customs of modesty that the Jewish women have as a custom, even though it's not written in the Torah, or if she's being divorced because of a bad reputation that she's gotten, that she's done some inappropriate stuff, even though we don't have clear definitive testimony that she was mizana. In all these cases, ein l'ksuba, she does not get a ksuba, lo is not the primary, not the addition, and neither does she get any of the conditions that come along with the ksuba. But each one of them, they tell us so she could take whatever's still left from her dowry that she brought into the marriage, whatever's still left, and go out with that. But the husband has no responsibility to pay anything, not what he had diminished in its value, not what was lost, that he's not responsible for. Whatever's around, she could take back. So the Rambam clarifies. These are the things. If she does any one of them, Moshe is considered violating the law of Moshe, meaning that's of the Torah law, which is, let's say, and these are not just regular halacha, but it's distinct for the marital relationship. She's going out into the street, and her hair of her head is uncovered. Or she takes vows, or she swears. She doesn't fulfill her vows. And not only that's forbidden, as the Gemara Ketubah says, because of that sin, the children die. Or she has marital relations, and she's a nida, a menstruating woman. She tells her husband, I'm tired, when really she's a nida. Or she does not take off when she's giving him bread, chala, which is obligated to take off to give it to the kain. Or she gives her husband to eat things that are prohibited to eat. And you don't have to say with bugs and vermin and dead and animals that were not properly slaughtered, which are biblically prohibited. Even things that there was no tithing from it, which, since it's bisman hazeh, as the Maggid Mishneh explains, it's only drabanan. Even that, if she's feeding him things that are not 100% kosher, these are all considered averes al das Moshe. Now, how could you know? How could you end up figuring this out as a detective that this is really so? Let's say she tells him, Peiros elu, oh, these peiros that I'm serving you, plain kain technically, that kain came along, he fixed it for me, he did all the ritual law required with that. Or v'isazu, oh, this dough, plain is officially chalas. Oh, that lady, that neighbor, oh, she separated the challah for me. Oh, this nida, that you see blood, oh, no, that sage, he permitted that stain for me, saying that's not a problem about nida. Now, after that he ate or he had relations with her, he asked that person, and that person says, it's called lahadam for its acronym. There's no such a thing. Your wife never came to me, I never did chalafar, I never purified the kesim. So let's say she was presumed to be as a menstruating woman in her neighborhood because she was wearing the garments that women used to wear as a nida. But she tells her husband, Tarani, I'm pure. Uvalin has relations with her, and then he finds out that the neighbors were all saying no, she was a nida because she was wearing this clothing. So this is all considered a bezat das Moshe. He could divorce her without giving her a ksuba. Halach yud beis. Beis das Yehudis. What's considered Jewish law? This is the custom of modesty that the Jewish women have already accustomed them to. And these are the following. If she does any one of them, she has violated Jewish law. And he can divorce her without giving her a ksuba. If she goes out to the street or even to an open-ended alley which opens up into the main streets, and her hair is uncovered, meaning even if she doesn't have those body veils that would cover her, like old women do. Even though her hair is covered with a handkerchief, but she's not wearing the veil like modest women usually did. Let's say she was spinning thread in the marketplace, and there's a rose or things like that connected panel padachta that's opposite her face, on her forehead or on her cheek. Like the immodest non-Jewish women do. Or she's spinning thread in the street. And she's showing off her arms two people, because as she's doing it, she needs room, and she's pulling her sleeve is showing off her arm. Or she's joking around, kidding around, fooling around with these young boys. Or she's petitioning from her husband for marital intimacy with a loud voice from her husband. So loud that the neighbors hear about her, screaming at her husband that why are they not together? Or if she curses her father-in-law, her husband's father, in front of her husband, all these things are considered iveris al dasyu. It's not the modest ways of Jewish women, and he could divorce her without iksuba. Now, moreover, it says Rambam Halacha Yud Gimel. Ezra HaSefer instituted, a woman should always be girdled with a belt, always constantly in her house, mishum tznius, because of modesty, which is a different interpretation exactly what this belt was. Is it a chastity belt because of a story that happened with an animal and a woman? But be that as it may, she has to be girdled underneath because of modesty. And if she does not girdle herself, or the girsa should be like Mag Mirsa Das Yehudis, which that's the one that's more appropriate. It's obviously not Torah law, but it wouldn't even be considered the Jewish faith or custom. So although Ezra was a besak in this, if a woman doesn't do this, well, if she has not lost her ksuba. And but let's say she goes out with her hair uncovered, but from courtyard to courtyard within the alleyway, but not into the movim foolish, and for sure not into the street. So as long as her hair is still covered at least with a handkerchief, so anybody that does that's not considered violating the faith, and therefore she does not get divorced without a ksuba. Halacha Yudal. Okay, let's say a woman does violate the faith that we mentioned before. So So first of all, there has to be a warning, because if she's warned, maybe she'll retract, and if she retracts, she does not lose her ksuba, and ve'edim. There also have to be witnesses on the warning and the fact that she did this wrong thing. And then she loses her ksuba. Let's say she violates these faith items only between him and her, and there's no witnesses to testify. The other and he knows that she did this wrong. But he warns her without any witnesses. And then he goes and warns her again. He claims and he says, after I warned her, she already did it again. She says, I never did this wrong thing, or he didn't warn me. So if he wants to divorce her, he has to give her the ksuba. Once she swears that she said she didn't violate this. Because if she admits that she violated this after she was already warned, then she doesn't get anything because she's admitting to her guilt. How is the case of when she gets divorced just because of a bad name, a bad reputation? For example, let's say there are witnesses, not for actual znus, but that she did something very repulsive, very disgusting. That it's very indicating that there was some sin over here. Although there's no bona fide testimony regarding znus which would obligate him to divorce her, still, this was also require him to divorce her without ksuba. Ketzad, how so? For example, let's say she was in the courtyard alone. And they see that there's a peddler coming out. Now, they come in right when that peddler is coming out. They see her getting up from the bed. She's putting on her underwear, or she's putting on that chastity belt. Or let's say they find moist spittle above the canopy, which is above the bed. Now, how would spittle get there on the top? Must have been that she was laying down, facing upward, and therefore she must have been mezana and had spit up during tashmish. Let's say the man and the woman, this other man, was coming out with this wife from a dark place. Or they were helping each other up from the pit, some secluded area or something like that. Or they saw him kiss her on the opening of her blouse. Or they saw him kissing each other. Or hugging each other. Or they went in one after the other and they closed the doors. Or things like this. So if the husband wants to divorce her, this is as because of a shemra. So in this case, it takes a ksuba here. He actually divorced her without a ksuba, and ve'ein zutrich asra. Now she does not have to have a warning, because once she did these things, most definitely she's problematic for her husband, and she doesn't have to be warned. The only thing is because there's no witnesses, so therefore he has no rights to divorce her without a ksuba. Halacha Dezayin, Iveras Das Moshe. If she violated the law of Moshe, which is the Torah, or the Jewish faith, or this case where she did something disgusting, like one of these items we just mentioned before, so in all these cases we don't force him to divorce her. Only if he wants to, then actually lo yaitzi, he doesn't have to divorce her. Now, but even if he did not divorce her, ein len ksuba. So in all those cases which we mentioned, so she does not get a ksuba when he subsequently divorces her. And the reason is because the ksuba is a rabbinic injunction. So that it shouldn't be light in his eyes to divorce her. But they were only particular about the women that are modest. But these that are breached, they don't have this takan of the ksuba. Rather, it should be light in his eyes actually to go ahead and divorce her, and therefore he has no obligation to go ahead and give her the ksuba. He doesn't have to divorce her, but when he does not have to give the ksuba. Halachah Zayin. Another Rambam talks about if there is actual znus. If someone saw his wife was mazana, she had extra marital relations. Or he didn't see, but one of his relatives or one of her relatives told him what happened. And he trusts those people. And he's really relying on them that his wife was mazana. Whether if the one who told him was a man, whether she was a woman, since he's relying on them, he knows that he's relying on them that they're saying the truth. So he has to divorce his wife. Here he has to, unlike the other cases. But lo allow, it's forbidden to have relations with her because she's forbidden to her husband when she was mezana. And be eating ksuba. But in this case, he has to give the ksuba because although he believes the witness, but he can't cause her a loss less than 2 witnesses. Now, let's say she admits that she was mezana, takes a ksuba, then she leaves without ksuba because it was her doing. So therefore, if she does not admit, he makes her swear by holding a holy object. She was not mezana. But if he saw himself her being mezana, and so he can, and then it's a definitive claim that he has, so he makes her swear, and then she collects the ksuba, although he knows she's lying, but he has no 2 witnesses. But let's say if it came through some other form, meaning he's relying on some, let's say, relative of his or hers, in Yochlesh B, then actually he can't even make her take an oath, because now he does not have a definitive claim. He cannot make a shvuah based on a doubtful claim. He's just relying on someone else that he heard. He cannot make her take an oath, ila de gilgul. Only what's called gilgul shvuah, meaning if she's obligated to make an oath for some other reason, he can then add on this oath that she was not mazana when she was married to him. Let's say his wife tells him, he says, she confesses, she was mazana with someone else willingly. So actually, meaning if she just comes up to her husband and says this, we don't pay attention to what she's saying. Because actually maybe her eyes are placed on another man. She actually wants to marry someone else, and if she wants him to divorce her, so she can go ahead and marry that other man. Now, actually interesting, after the Takan Rabbeinu Gershom, where he cannot forcibly divorce her, that actually also the husband is not believed to say his wife from the Zana, because he might want to marry someone else. But here we're talking about regarding her, she's not believed to say this. Aval of the ksubasa ikra, but she does lose the primary ksuba and the addition of the belois, and she loses out her rights to the worn out items that she had brought into the marriage. Because she confessed to having been mizana, and her testimony for her own detriment is like 100 witnesses. Now, but let's say he really trusts, he knows, he realized that he trusts that his wife is saying the truth, that she was mizana, and he's relying on what she's saying. Then again, if there was true nus that he knows and he's relying on, he has to divorce her. Now, the ein bezdin koivinus ishlagar says but the court does not force the husband over here in these situations to divorce his wife, and then in these situations, until there's 2 witnesses, and they testify the wife mazan in front of them willingly, then we force him to divorce her. But again, when he himself knows and he's relying on that, we don't force him, but he has the obligation to go ahead and divorce her. And again, but he cannot make a lotus ksuba until there's actually 2 witnesses who go ahead and verify this, or when he actually goes and divorces her, like we said, then they don't get a ksuba, because even if she does just a dava mechurim, then the halacha is that we know that she's not someone that we want to have the tzarkan chachamim, because we want it to be allowed in his eyes to divorce her. And again, that's regarding that of the ksuba. Halacha test. So a woman that was mizana when she was married with her husband by mistake, for example, let's say there was 2 couples in an apartment, and he's intending for his wife, and turns out it was the other man's wife, and she also didn't know that, she thought it was her husband, so it was by mistake, or she was raped, meaning it was against her will, She's permitted to her husband, like it says in the pasuk Midbar, that she was not forced. But if she was forced, then she actually would be permitted. Whether it was a non-Jew who raped her, whether it was a non-Jew or a Jew who violated her. Now, if at least the beginning of the cohabitation was forced, even though at the end she wants it, she says, leave him. Even if he had not raped me, I would pay him. She's permitted. Why? Because her desires, her inclination is clothing her, meaning is she. The truth is, in the beginning, she was forced. But then the desires of the body become inflamed, and therefore she's saying, don't stop him, but the truth is, it's still categorized as an aynus, and therefore she's permitted to her husband. Now, halacha chav, nashim sheganvu esan listim. Regarding women that bandits had abducted them, harin kishbulis, they have the same halacha categorization as when they were in captivity, sheinanusis, which they're considered raped, umutaz labalayin, and they're permitted to their husbands. Now, but let's say if the bandits, the robbers, let them go home to their husbands, yet on their own they go back to the robbers. Now they're doing it willingly. Now they're forbidden to their husbands. And says the Rambam, and the reason why if a woman does it by mistake is the same halacha as if it was forced on her, because a mistake has an element of force, because you don't realize what's happening, and it's not with your full ratzon and consent, and therefore those are cases when she's not going to be forbidden to her husband. Now, halacha chafal, but when we say this, b'shayim bali Yisrael, only if her husband was a non-kohen. But if the wife of a kohen, even if it was a mistake or she was raped, she's forbidden to her husband, because ultimately she becomes a zayna, which is a woman having extramarital affair, even though it wasn't willingly. So it's not her fault, like because but she becomes a zayna, and he's forbidden, even if the woman's not a bad person, he's forbidden the zayna, and therefore he automatically becomes forbidden to this wife. Now, halacha beis, whether it's the wife of a non-kohen or Eshes Kohen Shenenso, or if it's the wife of a kohen who was raped, she still gets her ksuba in either one that's raped, even the wife of a kohen, even though she doesn't stay married to him because she didn't do anything wrong. She gets the primary and the addition. She doesn't lose anything from a ksuba. And for kohen is a kohen, we force the kohen, who even though he's forbidden because he's forbidden designer, as the Torah says, "Vikidashte," we force him balkarchai to keep the Kahanic laws. We force him like ksubasa ulagarsha to give her the ksuba and to divorce her because again he can't stay married to her. Halacha Gimel, Eshes kohen shamar labala. The wife of a kohen says to her husband, "Nanasti, I was raped. By mistake, I went and I had cohabitation with someone. I didn't realize. I thought it was you." We don't have to be concerned for her words. Maybe she's just looking at some other man. She wants to get married to someone else, and he wants her to divorce her. Now, but if she was trustworthy to him, meaning he realizes that she's saying the truth. At least that's how he perceives it. Or someone else tells him that he saw this, who he relies on that person's word. Then then he should divorce her because he's relying on that, and he knows that she's forbidden to him, and to give her the ksuba again because she doesn't lose it in this situation when she was raped. Now, halacha of Daled, related, the Rambam talks about that of the Saita, the suspected adulterous woman. If someone says to his wife in front of two witnesses, don't seclude yourself with that man. And then she goes into seclusion in front of two witnesses with that man. And she delayed the amount of time in that seclusion, the amount of time of becoming defiled by having inappropriate relations with that man. So she's forbidden on her husband until she drinks what's called the bitter waters, like Rambam explained in Hilchos Saita. Now, the Meis Kodim Sheyeshkena, if he dies before that she was given to drink to verify if she was mizan or not, ein la ksuba, she does not get a ksuba because maybe she was tamei and she's forbidden, and therefore we don't know for sure if she's deserving of the ksuba. Now, even if they don't find any bad stuff on her, they did their detective work, they don't find anything inappropriate that was known, because there's nothing more disgusting than this, that she secluded herself with the man that she was suspected with after her husband went and warned her. Now it says the Rambam, in today's times that there's no more Saita waters to drink in the base of Mikdash, so in such a situation she would be forbidden forever to her husband because, like we said, you got to wait for the verification of the Mesaita. We don't have it. So she has to be divorced without ksuba, without the primary and the addition. Because it was her bad actions that she did, and she went against his warning that caused her to be forbidden. And although there would be a verification in terms of mizmah, now we don't have it. She leaves without ksuba. Now Allah Chavhei. Let's say between him and her, without witnesses, he tells her, I don't want you to school with that man. And he sees her secluding with that man. She delayed the amount of time that she could be defiled by him. In today's times, that there's no sight of waters to verify, she's going to be forbidden on him. So he has to divorce her because he has to suspect that she was mizana. But he has to give her the ksuba because, again, he's not believed to make her lose the ksuba based on his own testimony. Now, but let's say she admits that she secluded with that man after she was warned by her husband, then then she leaves without a ksuba because she's admitting, which is like 100 witnesses, which that itself, if she did such a thing with 2 witnesses, would make her lose her ksuba. So therefore, if she's denying this, he can at least make her swear on this, and she swears that I didn't seclude with him, and then he has to give her the ksuba. So he has to divorce her, but then she gets her ksuba.